Okay, so I made a presentation about Magicka's tutorial, about how it foments curiosity and experimentation, and I'm going to talk about how it does that during the tutorial. So first off, the developer is called Arrowhead Studios, which made this game in 2008, and they won the best game award for the Swedish Game Awards on 2008. They made their first game as a company on that contest, and then they contacted Paradox Interactive to actually publish the game and make something for to release to Steam and other platforms, and they had a lot of success with it. And then later they published other games such as Gauntlet and the Showdown Effect, which are a lot of them, almost all of them, or all of them, multiplayer centric, either in cooperative aspects or in competitive aspects. But there's always a lot of player interaction in their games. Also, they released Helldivers most recently, which also, as you will see in the style of Magicka's gameplay, they really like to make games which involve player cooperation and basically helping each other and playing together. And it's one of their core fundamentals of their game design. One thing I found which was interesting in their webpage was their core principles of Arrowhead, which I think they were really interesting. So I want to mention them. First of all, it's believability. They want to make that the universe and the world building in their games seems real, even if it's fantastical. They want it to feel that it could be possible, that it has rules, and it feels like something genuine. They want sociality in their games, so they can connect players and generate memorable stories, not only from the narrative and the stuff inside the game, but the stuff that happens within the game, the relationship with the players, and playfulness. They want to spark creativity and let players explore a way to play their games. So basically, the core aspect of games in general, that is just trying out things and finding your own way. And also, they said we believe that games should challenge the creativity of the individuals who play them. And I think that the Magicka as a game and the tutorial, as I will explain, really showcases this concept. Also, a game for everyone is a game for no one. This is one that it doesn't relate that much to the others, but I think it's really good to take into account when you're making games. And the developers put in real effort for making so that any combination that you can think about has an actual effect in game. It's really crazy. The thing is, there's a lot of possibilities. You can do a lot of things. By the way, is everything going all right? Pan, ¿se me oye bien?
Yeah, we got you, Carles.
Okay.
Yeah, perfectly.
You can do a bunch of stuff in Magicka, and the question being is, how do you teach all this to the player without him wanting to hang himself? Because it's a lot of stuff, and you need to kind of crush it in a cram session in a tutorial. It's really hard. So we'll get to it.
Sorry, just to make sure,
Yeah.
in order to properly play the game, you need to know all of this. It's all mandatory.
No, it's not. Magicka is really fun in the way that you have a billion possibilities,
Yeah.
but you can choose the strategies that you feel like doing. You don't necessarily need to use all the combinations.
Okay.
I will speak later about this, that or mention it briefly at least, that there are enemies that will force you to get out of your zone of comfort. And
Okay.
if you use a lot of rocks, they will bring out shields and you will need to use something different. But you don't necessarily have to use all of this. But
Okay.
you can use all of this.
Okay.
And
Thank you
it's
very
fun to
much.
use all of this. So it's cool to teach it. So you start by falling into a hole when someone messes up his spell, and you are trapped in the dungeon of the wizard school that you start in. And that's when the tutorial begins. So first off, I wanted to start with icons and the art of being concise, because just starting, this happens. A bunch of text explodes in front of you, and it's super small with a font that is really not really readable. It says Magic is a game where you can experiment, combine. I don't like this. I think that this text of Magic is a game about blah 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 could be put after the tutorial, after you have played around a little bit with stuff. So you say, hey, okay, you've come through the tutorial. This is Magicka, welcome. But even if you wanted to put this here or there, having this bunch of text, as you can see, so small in the middle, which completely fails at that rule that Joan stated, which is being able to read text across the room. Even if it's a PC game, it feels very hard at this. So I think it's bad. And there could be a better way to introduce the game that is not with just plain text in the middle pausing the game. On the other hand, when you start playing the game and it says, okay, now you have to heal yourself because you hurt yourself from the fall. Now you have to get to the swords and get one to cut the rope. On each step, there's like these little symbols of the hardware, the controllers to do the steps. And I think this is really nice because you don't have to read, you have to press the right mouse button. It just, there's a GIF animation that says click this. And it's really fast, it's really intuitive, it's great. And in general, each time that you learn a new element, it says its name, it says what it does, what type it is, its properties, opposites, blah, blah, blah. A lot of text. And I think it's unnecessary. Magicka uses a massive amount of text, and I don't know why. But I think that it could be improved with icons. Not necessarily removing all the text, but you could establish uh, like a library of icons for the player to understand. And every time that he learns a new spell and sees the symbol, like the laser one I put in here as an example, okay, that one works just like that other one, and you create this relationship with the symbiology, and it's a lot faster to understand. You don't need to read. And I think that would help, so that every time that you face an element, it just appears icons and you'd help understand the concept. So getting into the tutorial now, into the step by step. First off, you start with elements and melee. It's the most easiest thing that you can do. You get hurt from the fall. They ask you to heal yourself with the only element you have available, which is life, and you heal yourself with life. And then you have to cut this rope with a melee attack after picking up a sword. They teach you the most basics one after the other. It's really smooth. And they also give you elements as you go into the tutorial. You don't start with all the elements. That will be too overwhelming. But also it's really interesting, as you can see here, that they discover they can fuck each other up. And that's really interesting because it's a really important part of Magicka's gameplay and also a tutorial, and we'll mention it later. So first off, they start with elements and melee. Then we go to, you can cast more times the same element. We said that you can combo up to 5 of the same element or different elements. If you can buy more elements, you get more power, and you can break that barricade to get onto the fire thingy. You can combine different effects, such as the fire element and the rock element, to create a special effect, which is the result of the combination. Status effects, such as water, will interact with elements such as fire to dry you up, or electricity to electrocute you. So they teach you that with a small river, they teach you that status effects will affect the way that you play with elements. They tell you about casting methods and require you to cast in an area. So you don't have to only cast forward, you can cast all around you with a spell. And every time that you go to each of these steps, you unlock a new element and you are given the freedom to do anything you want with it. You don't lose any of the other previous elements. You are able to cast whenever you want. They didn't stop you from casting once you've gone through the skill gate. So they respect the player by saying you can try things out if you want. I mean, we won't stop you. And they teach you about elements in the environment, how you can use elements like freezing water to get around and interact with your environment. Same goes with fire, electricity, and other kind of elements. They also then teach you that you can use spells, which is specific combos of elements to do a very specific spell. And then at the end, they do a warm up, which learns give you kind of a risk-free space to try things up and to uh, learn to choose which strategy you want to go with after learning all those things on a risk-free environment. And then you face a final boss, which is not hard, but you have to try to kill it, and it's not that easy. So it's basically the final skill gate to get out of the tutorial. So skill gates: checking and not assuming. Every time that, as I said, every time that you learn a new skill or a new element, they put a skill gate that needs to confirm that the player has learned what the game is trying to teach, and you can't advance if you don't go through this skill gate, which I think is really nice, because then you secure that the player understands what you're trying to teach before going forward. And there's some issues with this, but we'll talk about it later. Uh, about the way Magicka kind of approaches it. I loved the fact that tutorial has a warm up. Like even after tutorial, Magicka has a lot of places in their tutorial phase, which is just trying things out without having any specific objective, or at least it being a broad one. And they just put a lot of these kind of goblin minions that they say you have to kill them, and
Hey,
they're just mining. Yes.
Carlos, when you say warm up, are you referring to what we usually name playgrounds or something like that, or
Yes.
no? It's
The,
the
the
same thing,
reason
right?
the reason why I say warm up is because it's a playground where you kind of train before the final boss. Like right after this playground comes the beholder that tries to kill you, and it's the
Yeah,
boss.
yeah,
The reason why,
I
yeah,
understand. So it's more accurate to say warm up to say than to say just the playground. I understand it
yeah.
and I like it.
One thing that the warm up does, which I think it's really interesting, is that it teaches you to choose. It doesn't teach you any special element. It doesn't teach you anything specific. It just throws you to a bunch of goblins that do nothing to you and are just useless. And it tells you, okay, kill them. And how you kill them is up to you. And then you start for the first time to formulate strategies. Do I want to freeze them? Do I want to just laser beam them? And then you teach the player to choose between all those options, which can be a little overwhelming, but not in a minimal risk environment. And then finally, you face the final boss, which just throws missiles at you and can take quite a lot of damage. So it's not as easy as killing a minion. You need to, if you want to kill him effectively, you need to try to put up shields and try to combine like lighting and arcane elements to do more damage, or burning or burning him with fire. And you need to try something more complex than just using one element. And it's not hard to beat, but it incentivizes you to try something more and not just stay with the basics. Also, it you can kill it in any way you want, which I think it's a core concept in Magicka, and it's really great that the final boss is based around that, killing it however you like. So now then we are out of the tutorial and we get to freedom. You get to a room full of wizards, and you get to kill every single one of them. And this is the playground, the second playground. The first was the warm up. You need to kill these people. You need to do this before getting to the boss. And then you get here, you get a bunch of wizards, and you can kill them however you like. You can test fire, napalm, rocks, boulders, lightning, whatever. They will take it and they won't give a shit. So you can test all that you have learned in a tutorial in a glorious, chaotic fashion, and it's really satisfying, and I love it. The way that Magicka lets you be free and try out all your different stuff with this starting playground.
But how does
Also,
this? How
mhm,
sorry, excuse me. How does this make? Does this need to or try to make sense in some narrative way, because it's kind of weird that you just like they look like your fellows, right? Why would you burn all of them to the ground? I mean, it's just a random thing that they do, or
The games of Arrowhead Studios are very humorous and very lightweight. And what they do with Magicka is very interesting, which is Magicka is about wizards, but at any point they put like a sense of camaraderie between wizards or any kind of we have to stick together. It's a wizarding school and we learn magic and everyone is a little dumb and a little crazy. So they do this thing which is very interesting that is they leave it up to you. Do you want to interpret that the Magicka school is a bunch of wizards that want to learn together and we're all friends and all that stuff? Great. Do you want to interpret that the Magicka school is a school of crazy people
oh,
which don't give a shit and are just
so
completely mad?
it's
That also works.
so it's procedural narrative, right? I mean, you make your own
Not
story.
procedural, but it's player interpretative narrative, at least for
Okay,
me.
okay.
Interpretative narrative. You will need to make another presentation.
Oh, God damn it. No, I think it's really cool. They don't put a lot of information, a lot of plot, and so the fact that you can do this and the way that the people talk and are kind of dumb, kind of contextualizes that these wizards are not the smartest people. Like now we get to the next part that is as soon as you get in this playground, you learn the revive spell. So they're acknowledging the the developers that as soon as you get out of those doors, you're going to kill your friends or you're going to kill yourself. So they give you an option to revert that, basically a pillow for your fuck ups. So they give a lot of room for the player to do whatever he likes, but also a way to recover from those mishaps. And then there's another playground which where you get out of that room where you do all that chaos. If everyone in the room has died, if everyone is gone and you still want more things, you still have this playground where you have these figures and some other dude that you can still keep practicing on, and you can do everything that you did before but with these guys which will never die. So uh you have all the space, all the time, everything you want to experiment and do whatever you feel like. And also, they do something that I think is pretty smart, which is a hidden exam. Once you go to the first stage of the first path, there's a little way which is kind of frontwards, and it's all right. I need to go that way, so I go that way. But if you think and I say, "Hey, there's water here," and in the tutorial I learned how to freeze water. I'm going to freeze this river and go across. If you do that, you get a spell which is grease. And I think that's a really cool way of rewarding the player for not only exploring, but for remember what he has learned and doing the most important thing in the entire game, which is thinking creatively with the tools that you have been given. In this case, interacting with the environment by using the ice, the cold element to freeze the river.
One question, like when you get spells like the grease spell, you said that the spells are like unique combination of elements that do really specific effects, right?
Yes.
So even if you don't get the spell, do you get, like even if you don't get that book, can you do the spell anyways if you combine
No.
the elements?
You
Or you
you
just
need to have the book to be able to make the combination. I
so
think
what
that
happens if you try to combine the elements and you don't have the book?
I think that if you try to cast a spell, nothing happens. If you try to use like a regular element use, because the thing on Magicka is that for in one hand there's like using elements, which is kind of casting, but it's using just the elements, and the other thing is just to consume your entire combination to do one specific spell,
Okay,
and that you require the book to use that spell. I
okay,
think that otherwise people will just look up guides and use all the spells and never care to get the books, which is
mhm.
kind of the fun.
Okay, okay. I didn't understand that.
So yeah, you
I,
can
I
use the
did not I did
elements.
not understand it, and now I do. You know.
Yeah, so you can see how he freezes the river. That's using five freeze elements. It's not a spell, but it's using five freeze elements in an area effect spell. While the one that he took, the book, or the one that you can see in the tutorial where he runs really fast, is a combination that then you press a button, which the button is to cast a spell specifically, not to use the elements. So a part of the tutorial and a part of Magicka in general is to learn together. The tutorial can be done with from 1 to 4 players, and that's really nice because players can teach one another. They can practice against one another and kill each other basically. And playing with friends is always more fun because you discover together, you talk about it, and there's kind of this interaction in every activity that it's just more fun with friends. Facts of life. The bad thing, however, is that only one player is required to go for each skill gate, which is bad because it kind of incentivizes alpha player gameplay of only one guy pushing forward and learning things while the other guys are just dragged to it. And dying is very tedious. Like you need to wait about 10 seconds between each death to respawn and get control back. And in a game where you can die by accident trying out things a lot of times, that's really messed up to having to wait that long to die. Because in the tutorial specifically, there's no revive spell. Even if you're playing co-op, there's only checkpoints. So if you kill your friend on purpose or by accident, which will happen, your friend will have to wait until the next challenge to be able to respawn, which I think is lame. You should be able to revive your friends at the very beginning. It's cool that they give it you earlier, but they should give you even more earlier. You should learn the revive spell at basically the beginning of the tutorial, and be able to revive your friends, so you can do horrible shit with no consequence, which is the fun of Magicka experimenting. So this is very bad. But the really nice thing of the tutorial overall, and the thing about learning it with friends, is that there's this process of you learn a new thing, learn a new thing, you do this new thing, and see what does. You experiment with it and the other tools that you have at your disposal, and you discover new things of what you can do. This whole combining elements and do different stuff. It's a core concept of Magic, and it's really cool that the tutorial works around that. And also having friends means that friends will try something, they will find something cool, and they say, "Hey, if you do this combination, something cool really happens," and they can tell other players how to do it. So yeah, this is we come back to what I said, which is having friends with murderous intent. And the best part of learning together is this.
Of course, saving the world gets boring, so you'll likely just spend most of the time crossing sword and staff with your fellow wizards, each of whom can be burned, drowned, smashed, shattered, zapped, blasted, and of course blown into meaty chunks for your own amusement. Have fun.
Did you hear the audio?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we
Great. So yeah, the reason why I created this presentation in the first place, apart from that Joan requested it to me, is that Magicka's tutorial is half the tutorial of the game and half killing your friends. There's a very incentive of creativity on how can I kill my friend in a more gruesome way that he killed me. And you learn a lot from that, actually, like using the elements to kill each other. There's this competitive aspect of it, and I think it's what inspired to make this presentation. I think it's really fun. So good and bad things of the tutorial overall. Following the perfect formula, I think it quite nails it. Not as much in the comfort aspect, but we'll get to it. In Teach, the difficulty scaling is really nice. It teaches each concept really slowly, and it gives you room to experiment with them whenever you have gone across a skill gate. And for each challenge, there's a skill gate that you need to come across. So they make sure that you learn what you have to learn, and that you can try it out on free spaces. The problem is dying, but we'll talk about it later. It excites you because every time that you learn a new thing, you can combine it with the previous things, the previous elements, and you get new combinations, and it's cool. And when you learn, for example, the new types of casting, you try every single type of casting with every element that you have, and there's a ton of combinations, and it gets you pumped up with the amount of magic that you will be able to do. It respects you because yeah, not at any point the game takes away your toys. It it forbids you from doing a thing or the other. Once you learn something, you're free to do it whenever and however you want. The only thing is comfort that dying in the tutorial and in the game as well, to be honest, is slow, is tedious, and is nonsensical. That you're punished for experimenting, for trying out things, which is the base of the game. Uh, and also, you can skip the tutorial in a pretty original way, which is when you fall in the hole at the beginning of the tutorial. They tell you that, hey, if you're feeling bad or if you need help, you can say you can you can ask us for help, and that the safe word is banana. So you can go to the main menu, press the banana button, and you skip the tutorial, which I think it's very original way to skip it. The complexity curve is really smooth, and the environments and the freedom of trying your newfound abilities is in the tutorial and is in the playgrounds. They give you a lot of space to try out things, and everything works together very smoothly. And here we get to what could be better, what we could do better to improve this.
Well,
First of all,
that's the most interesting part. Go ahead.
First off, I think that you're punished for dying, and it's very easy to die, and I think that's lame. So I do what I say I do, which we would teach spells early into the tutorial, which is not a very hard thing. Is just combining specific types of elements and pressing a button. It's not complicated. So you teach spells early, and then you give out the revive spell. So from that point on, you don't need checkpoints or anything. Players can just revive each other. And even then, in single player mode, because there's no one to revive you on the campaign, you get a fairy. This fairy can revive you once, and then if you die again, you die for real. If this actually exists, I think it would be a really nice if even if it's single player or co-op, in the tutorial you have a fairy that follows you, and if you die, it gets you up. It gives you enough time to understand that you died, which is a bad thing. You shouldn't die, but it gives you this feel that the fire revives you. And then when you're out of the tutorial, the fire goes away, and if you die for real. But during the testing phase, the tutorial, you could have this fairy that helps you and revives you. So it's a less risky environment. It's not as tedious to die. And even if we didn't implement any of these two, at the very least, make the respawn process quick. You shouldn't take that long to die when you're testing things and you die in the process. It should be a very fast process. Then, second part, only one player has to go through the skill gate, and that's bad because you don't secure that everyone is learning. So, looking at it from a development standpoint and not only a design, there could be like a secondary way or secondary group challenges which require at least two players to complete, which would be at least enough to be an alpha gamer barrier, which is that one guy that completes the game all by himself. You will need at least someone else, and ideally it will require all players to pass through. But having challenges that can be adapted to 2, 3, and 4 players can be a little challenging depending on development time. So at the very least, two players. That two players have to cooperate to get a challenge across, and these two players can be swapping in a 4-player room. But at least it will block a single guy to just go forward. Also, there's this cool mechanic in Magicka that if you do 2 beams, players can join the beams and do a super beam. And I think it would be really cool if there would be, if you're playing co-op, there will be this challenge where they ask you to do a together beam with another player to go across a skill gate. So they teach you what the join the beams mechanic works, and also require 2 players to go through that skill gate. If you were playing single player, the laser could be just an environment thing that you can join with by yourself. But if you're playing co-op, it could be another player. I think it would have been a really interesting thing to add to the tutorial, like showing the power of cooperation. This I'm not so sure about it, but I think it's worth a mention that there are concepts about secondary elements like steam and ice, or laser reflection in shields, or joining the beams. All of these are not taught on the tutorial and are mentioned briefly in some tips, but as you can see, they're super small. And I understand that as tips they have to be small, but they're just plain white text with any kind of visual symbology or icon, so they're really easy to miss. And personally, I would make them at least bigger in text, not enough big that like uh, they get in the middle of your game on the screen, but at least big enough, or with an icon like an exclamation icon that says, "Hey, look at here," because otherwise it can very easily pass through without the player noticing it. Any of these things that I said that is not teach, it could be another step of a tutorial that you need to do this to go forward. That said, I'm on the fence on this one because I think that experimentation is core in Magicka, and I think that allowing for discovery of new mechanics and be able to master the game further down the road is also a part of it. Like not cluttering the game too much in the tutorial and allowing the player to just learn things as they go. And even if they're not obvious, they're kind of hidden mechanics. Maybe the player, when they try out things, they say, "Hey, I shoot a laser and it bounced off somewhere. How did that happen?" And they try to recreate it. And it's part of the game, experimenting, finding out new stuff that you can do.
It's a game inside the game, within the game, isn't?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it really enhances the sense of mastery of being all powerful in the game, of discovering these new things, these new ways of using elements and using them to your advantage. For example, in the tutorial, they don't teach you that if you use the shield spell with the healing spell, you make mines and you make healing mines that heal you. They don't teach you that. You discover it when you make combinations. I think it's a really magical part, being redundant as it is in Magicka, of discovering things in the game. Uh, and then the second part, which we talked about this in the boss class, which is when you face the final boss, they teach you the shield element, and I think that's bad because you're teaching a new mechanic to the player at the same time that they're trying to face their like final challenge. You're making them focus on two things at once, and I think it's unnecessary. I think that the ideal for me would have been to you can make an environment hazard like a laser that turns on and off, and you need to use the shield to cover yourself from it. But I think that the best way to use this is, as you can see in the GIF, imagine that I am the beholder. I'm the purple guy. If I use the laser against the shield and hit myself, I do damage to myself because shields can bounce lasers. It's a mechanic of the game. I think it would have been really cool that there was an enemy, this beholder itself, which tries to laser you and you bounce the laser into him. So you learn that the shields protect you, but also learn that the laser beams can be reflected by shields. And you learn two things at the same time. And you optimize like learning by learning two things at the same time and using the shield to protect you. And then the next step could be the final boss, or after you have hit the beholder 3 times with the laser, he goes back and then you have the final battle. But you shouldn't I think the game shouldn't have to compress the final challenge of the tutorial with learning the shield. You should learn stuff in a separate in a separate part in a safe environment, and then get to fight the final boss. And if you want to use the shield, but it shouldn't be something that you learn at that specific moment as well. And as I said before, in a not too distant future, the game throws enemies at you, which are bigger, are like some are fire elementals, some have shields, some have arrows, some have bombs. There's a lot of different enemies, and they require different strategies and different element combinations to defeat. So they force you out of your comfort zone. And I think I wouldn't talk about this, but it's part of the tutorial. And then conclusions. I think I talked already too much, but basically, I love Magicka. as a game. I think it's an amazing game that incentivizes discovery, creativity, and experimentation. I think that it puts that really well into the tutorial. And while it could be improved in some ways, I think that the tutorial does a great job at introducing the player to what Magicka is all about, which is combining elements, finding your own strategies, and discovering new ways to spell. And I don't have a last slide. This is it. But thank you for coming to my presentation.
Well, that's right. That's really nice. I think this is one of the best presentations that we had here on the server, isn't it, guys?
Yep.
Yeah, really, really extensive. I think it's well argumented. I can see a lot of work behind the graphical support, like the GIFs and the
Support is
presentation itself.
really well worked. So thank you
Yeah,
very much, Carlos. Do you have any questions, guys?
I actually do. Can you go back, please, to the icons and accessibility slide?
Yes.
All the way at the beginning. Here, thank you. Yeah. I agree with you, but only partially. You say that all of this text is hindering the player, and I agree. But your proposed solution, while it fixes the problem you present, I think it creates a new kind of problem, and it's an accessibility problem. If this is found in the tutorial, the player has had not time yet, at least, to understand what all of these icons mean. Some are pretty like self-explanatory, like the beam or the healing, but you will run eventually at a problem that it's that the player doesn't understand the icon. Maybe if you implement the icon, would you also support kind of like a reminder text kind of
Yes.
checkbox?
Yes, I would. I think that's a great idea. And basically, having text with icons is great because the text is specific while the icon is very highlighting.
Yeah.
The thing is that the what I wanted to represent here is without the text, if you could be able to understand what's on the left with what's on the right,
Okay.
like take it to the extreme.
Okay.
But I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
The thing is that when I played the tutorial and I saw opposites, arcane, I know what that means, but I thought a new player will have no idea what that means.
Exactly.
Especially if there's no icon for arcane. What is arcane? Arcane is the red thing, which can't be combined with life. But just plain text, you wouldn't understand. But I completely agree with you that text supported by imagery, just like in the in the hardware thing, the buttons.
Yep.
That's perfect. You need to do this, but then there's a visual symbology for you to follow.
Yeah, I think we all agree. So just a last question, Carlos. I think that I don't know if all of us, but I think that most of us have a really hype right now to play this game. I was looking for the game while you are making the presentation. So, what kind of platforms are able to play the game right now, or if we want to play multiplayer, which one are your recommendations?
The thing is, Magicka, I think I would recommend PC. I'm not sure which platforms it's available, but Magicka was created by using it was a MOBA, QWER, like this kind of setup. With one hand, you're making combinations, like if you were playing a MOBA. And with the mouse, you're deciding how you're casting and where you're casting, and even where you're moving. You move like a MOBA. You click and you move there. So I think that PC would be the best recommendation on which platform to play. I don't know if it's available in other platforms.
It's for Android, iOS, and Xbox 360 also.
It's for Android also.
Yes.
It's for Android. Google. That's okay. So the last thing, if someone wants to play a little bit to the game, just stay on the channel at the very end of the presentation's time, and we will talk about this because at least I want to play a little bit to the game. Okay. Thank you very much, Carlos.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.